It's happening again. You're watching Carspiracy with me, Danny. Now, today's show is going to be a little different. I want to talk about the RPM Act. I want to talk about why dealer franchise laws are ridiculous. And I also want to talk about the entire reason this podcast exists and who I am a little bit. So let's start with this thing called the RPM Act, the Recognizing the Protection of Motorsports Act. I'm going to link down in the description down below where you can sign a petition from SEMA. And here's the thing. Right now, the EPA wants to chomp down on you, the individual, from taking his street car and turning it into a track car. That's right. If you're listening to this right now while you're wrenching on your Rust Bucket 240SX that you paid $8,000 for, $5,000 of which was on your credit card with extremely high interest and $3,000 was from your grandma. By the way, you're terrible with money. You shouldn't have any, and that's why you're going to end up bankrupt. But you're dropping in an LS that you got out of a junkyard van right now. They don't want you to do that. Now, at the outset of creating Idiots versus Idiots, I told the big man, I said, listen, I'm not offended or scared of being political. I just don't think it serves the wider interest of creating a podcast about business. In the case of Carspiracy, a podcast about cars. But occasionally, I'm going to talk about how the laws and how government affect business and cars, because obviously they do. They're a fact of life. And in doing so, I'm going to be open about the fact that I'm antagonistic towards all government. I believe in the radical privatization of everything because I believe in this basic sentiment that human beings are individuals. They have rights. Those rights don't come from government. And one of those rights is to own themselves. And that radical privatization serves the wider interests of the average man rather than government. And I don't want to dive deep into that or explain what any of that means. I'm an anarcho-capitalist. The Wikipedia, it'll serve, and you can read about what that means. But basically, I'm a crazy libertarian. So when I see stuff like this, and I need to say this much, I have been a car guy for as long as I can remember. Now, being a car guy for a lot of people in this country is kind of like who your favorite sports team is. You get it from your old man. I didn't. I love my dad. I see him all the time. We have a great relationship. Him and my mom are still married. But the reason it didn't come from my old man is because he didn't have that culture to bring to me. Because where he grew up, cars weren't a thing, right? There was a luxury that no normal guy could ever afford. So the concept of buying a car for fun when he got to America was not something that was not in his wheelhouse. It wasn't something he thought about, which is totally fine. But I have been a car person since I can't remember how long. And car culture has been a place for me to go and belong. Now, when I see someone coming from my family, when I see the government coming from my family, I see Waco. That's how I see it. Like, I don't think this is going to, first of all, I think this law is going to end up passing. But basically, it's like, listen, the government doesn't want you to have fun. The basic premise of this law is you can't slap twin Turley boys on your LS. They don't want you going skirp. They don't want the choo-choo. They don't want you having any fun. They want to rob you of your God-given freedom and individuality. Now, I'm a religious guy, so I'm never going to say, well, cars were like church to me. But in a lot of ways, it was. Okay? And if it needs to happen, I will be the person to lead the charge. I will start the Church of Gasolina. Part of our tenets will be modifying cars. Part of our tenets will be, listen, we're going to drop 1,000 horsepower in a car with a stock transmission and stock driveline, and we're going to blow the thing up on the highway because it's our God-given right. This is America. The NASCAR exists because guys were like, hey, while we're not running moonshine, let's race on a track. Because we're just going to say middle fingers to the freaking 5-0, bro. So this country was founded on being rebellious. And this rebellious culture reverberates throughout the world. Let me give you an example. You can go watch. There's a couple of documentaries, like online documentaries you can watch. One of them, I think, is from Vice, but it's basically about how there's an entire burgeoning lowrider scene in Japan. Japan's a whole other country. We dropped 2 atom bombs on Japan, and now they're like, hey, we see how your Mexican immigrants do up their cars. That's really cool, bro. Same thing in Northern Europe. There is an entire lead sled culture. The United States' culture is our greatest export. People think it's war. I wish it wasn't. But again, not trying to be political, just saying. And here's a good example. Ford Europe, when Ford designed the new Mustang, they designed it to be right-hand drive and with a 4-cylinder engine option because they wanted to bring the vehicle to Europe for the first time ever. They did that successfully. 80% of the orders and purchases for Ford Mustangs in Europe were, get this, V8s. Nobody wants the dumb 4-cylinder. Okay? We have created a subculture, and the notion that the government's going to tell you that you can't modify your car because it hurts a penguin's feelings, guess what? Penguins don't have U.S. passports. I do. The concept that it's offensive to me, right? It's offensive to me as a car guy. It's offensive to me as a crazy libertarian. It's offensive to me all over the place. But the point is, I'm going to link in the description to SEMA. They have way more information on the specific law they're trying to pass, which is the RPM Act, which is to reverse the EPA from being able to clamp down on you having fun and, being a bro. So, listen, hey, I'm just saying, though, just throwing this out there, if you would, please don't run anybody over when you're leaving Cars and Coffee in your Mustang, but still modify your Mustang and bring it to Cars and Coffee. Just saying, don't ruin the park and chill by trying to be fancy on the way out, because we've all seen burnouts. We can watch the videos, but, that's neither here nor there. But I definitely wanted to talk about how horrifying it was to watch this thing. And listen, I was this weird kid growing up that really had nowhere to belong in junior high and high school. The car guys, even though I can't wrench on anything to save my life, okay? But I still know that a 4G63 engine, the earlier, I think it's the 3 bolts have crank walk. Do I know what any of that means? Of course not. I just know that it's a thing and I don't want that thing. But I also know that I want cars to go choo-choo down the street, and I want them to go skirp on the track, and I'm not going to let the EPA take that away from me. And like I said, I will literally start the Church of Gasolina, and we will make it part of a religion, and then watch the government try to tax us, regulate us. Holy crap, that I just solved this problem? As a nonprofit, all of this becomes non-taxable, and as a church, they can't regulate dick. But so I'll link to the description, a link in the description to that SEMA thing, and you should check that out. And definitely, if you care about cars, or if you care about being a boy racer, you should absolutely reach out to the government on that one. And then, listen, these 2 things kind of relate. And in one of the last episodes, I did say I wanted to talk about how the dealer franchising model in the United States is rigged. And there's so many different layers to this, and I figure as long as I'm being political at the outset of this thing, talking about the EPA, trying to make everyone sad, and I might as well just embrace being political today and talk about this. I'm all for competition. I think all forms of taxation are theft, and I think all forms of regulation that are publicly enacted are the work of a literal Satan, the literal Satan. I think Satan's just one entity. And so a lot of people see the dealer business, and dealers, new car sales contribute 20% of sales tax in most states. So when the government has a benefit, they don't do what's best for the consumer. They do what's best for the person providing that benefit, and that is the dealer lobby. So the dealer lobby creates these franchise laws saying, Danny can't just go start a dealership where I go and sell only the cars people actually want to buy. And here's And so I want to dive a little bit more, one, standard deviation from that and say, listen, there is a menagerie of government regulation. There's a menagerie of laws, departments, all this stuff that govern the car that you drive. It's not just the EPA, it's the NLRB. It's the NHSTA, or whatever they're called, the National Highway Safety Transit Administration, whoever they are. And this menagerie, this kaleidoscope of regulation, if you will, governs the kind of cars that get built and ultimately governs the kinds of cars that get sold. So the EPA is, obviously, and listen, before anyone calls me a magatard or something, listen, the EPA was created by Nixon. So I'm no friend to the red or the blue. I fly the black flag. So, and I'm going to link in the description to this, the article from the episode of Adam Ruins Everything. And he ruins cars, and he talks about... And listen, Adam makes some lefty political presumptions about this is about, enriching whatever. And it's not. And let me just say this much to the dealers. And I know people who own new car dealers, they're friends. And I have a friend who owns a used car dealer. And listen, if you can make money selling new cars, if you can make money selling used cars, rather... You can make money. There are dealerships right now that just sell used cars. There are businesses right now that just repair cars. There are businesses, they're called banks, that just loan money on cars. Are you telling me that if we vertically integrate these things, you can't make money? Tesla's doing just fine with its showrooms and it's selling cars. And what ends up happening is these franchise laws and these dealer association lobbies, what they do is, a dealer... a lot of these dealers start in the genesis of them, not the Hyundai Genesis sub-brand, but the genesis of these dealers. A lot of these are legacy dealerships, and they grow and they become wealthy, and then they spend money on getting the government to pass regulations to prevent you from competing. And those regulations essentially help them. But here's one way that the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, contributes to making a worse marketplace, a worse set of choices for the general consumer. As I mentioned, with Ford Europe, when they were bringing the Mustang to Europe for the first time, nobody wants, the marketplace, generally speaking, does not want dumb American cars. They want awesome American cars. What are awesome American cars? Generally speaking, V8 rear-wheel drive. Right? That is, and listen, the world over respects that the United States created this genre of automotive industry. Listen, if you want something that's boring and mundane, you're on your fourth divorce, okay, you're moving into a trailer park with Betty, and you just got a new job selling magazines door to door. You need a gold Prius. That's what you need. It's a gold Prius. That is what you need at that stage of your life, and that's fine. And when you strike it rich and you start some internet business, guess what? You're going to go buy a Hellcat, right? A wide-body Hellcat red-eye. And that's fine. But the point is, we want reliable transportation from the Japanese. We want exquisite craftsmanship from the Europeans. And we want vroom, vroom, skirp, skirp from the Americans, right? We understand that they all have a unique thing to offer the marketplace. And that's the point of a marketplace. Having unique offerings that the consumer freely gets to choose from. And the National Labor Relations Board, I submit, and the automotive union lobby took Detroit, America's capital for auto manufacturing, from being the wealthiest city in the world, in 1960, to now being a third world city in a supposedly first world country. And what it does is it basically says the existing auto manufacturers that have manufacturing facilities in union-mandated states can't open facilities without union offsets or something like that in non-union states. So what happens is the NLRB pushes out American auto manufacturers to Canada and to Mexico. And what happens is the Japanese can come in and Volkswagen is in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because they're right to work. Alabama has Mercedes, all these other things. They end up in non-union mandated right to work states where people aren't mandated to join a union because the union lobby created this law that basically says everyone has to be unionized if they build cars. And what then in turn what happens is those unions push for unreasonable wages, which is why if you want to go buy a Suburban, it's $100,000. And then they push for hours. So what happens is the NLRB creates a situation that where General Motors goes, okay, we have to pay these people $1 bajillion. We have to make 4 shifts, even though we only have 2 shifts worth of cars that the consumer wants. So here's what's happening. The consumer wants V8 rear-wheel drive cars. General Motors wants to build V8 rear-wheel drive cars. The NLRB says, well, you have to provide $1 million and 5 shifts for our workers, or there's no one to build your cars, and you can't build these cars outside of these unionized states. Then the EPA comes in and says, well, hey, guess what? No one wants to buy a dinky 4-cylinder car from you, but you have to build 1 million of them because you have to meet CAFE standards, which is the corporate average fuel economy. So these 2 organizations hamstring automotive manufacturers into building products that they don't want to build and you don't want to buy, which is it's a massive waste of human capital and resources because we're building engines, we're building parts for cars when the average person buying a Chevy Spark would rather go out and buy a Mazda 3, even though the price differential is, listen, but that's neither here nor there. The point is the average consumer would rather buy that, okay? But we are forcing prices up. We are wasting resources, all for the glorification of these 2 and these semi-private, semi-public, these weird incestuous things happening. But how that relates back to dealers is the manufacturers don't own dealerships. They're owned by franchisors. And initially, it created a scenario that kind of screwed the car manufacturers. But the car manufacturers figured out how to use this to their advantage. They said, hey, it's illegal for you to sell new cars unless you're a dealership. Your contract with us as a franchisor, we can dictate what kind of cars you get to buy. So the franchisor buys the car from the manufacturer. So here's what happens. Chevrolet, nobody wants a dumb 4-cylinder Econobox from Chevrolet. We want vroom, vroom, skirp, skirp. We want to roll coal. That's what we want Chevys for. That's beautiful. God bless America. Fireworks, okay? George Strait, all of that stuff. So what ends up happening, though, is the manufacturer says, hey, you guys want the new C8 Corvette Z06? Great. You get an allotment of 2 of them, but you have to buy 15 rear-wheel drive Colorados to sell in Wisconsin. And they're going to end up sitting on your lot, and you're going to end up eating your own dick for 3 years. But that's just you were forced into that relationship. So the franchise laws don't benefit the consumer, and in halfway they kind of end up screwing dealers too. But in the Adam versus everything, Adam ruins everything. Adam Conover talks about how it makes cars about $1,800 more expensive. That's just one layer of government regulation of how they make cars more expensive. There's several layers of government making it untouchable for the average American. And listen, I don't agree with everything that Adam Conover says. He's like, it's a symbol of freedom, but it's required. No, you can take the bus, but the bus sucks. So of course people want a car. Cars are awesome. So I don't agree with everything he says, but as a basis of starting to understand one layer of how the regulation affects how you buy a new car, it's a great place to start. Now to kind of round off this wonderful program that I blessed all of you with so graciously, so generously, I want to talk about why Carspiracy exists. Of course, my name is Danny, and this is Carspiracy. I'm literally the Alex Jones of cars. I've been a car guy, like I said at the beginning, as far as I can remember. And like I said, it's not like I got it from my dad. He's an immigrant. He only sees cars as a utilitarian thing. They're a tool. It's a hammer. He doesn't get it. And that's fine. The culture is what drew me in. I like every kind of car, with the exception of hot rods. I don't dislike hot rods. I get it. I'm just like, let me put it this way. If I saw a hot rod show and I had a couple hours, I might stop. But like, I'm not looking it up online to like, I have to go to the hot rod show. Cars and Coffee, exotics, hypercars, muscle cars, JDM, trucks, diesel trucks, all of it. I love it all. All right. And I was into cars before the Fast and the Furious came out, but the Fast and the Furious is what put me into that JDM category so hardcore. My first car ever was a 1990 300ZX in sterling silver moss, two-seat coupe, 5-speed manual, non-turbo. Loved the car. My dad thought it was too dangerous and it scared him, and so he bought me a ticket to see my uncle in New York after my junior year in high school, where I never actually went to my junior year in high school. I went to college, but that's the age I was. And when I got back, the car wasn't here anymore. So I have been a car nut forever, and I understand why car manufacturers make dumb decisions, or decisions that anyway appear dumb to the enthusiast. The enthusiast doesn't understand or cannot comprehend why something wouldn't be profitable. But I'm a businessman. And by the way, I'm an automotive genius. And by the way, I could run literally every single automotive manufacturer from a strip mall in Waco, Texas. Okay, I'm not kidding. With this, give me 15 people on staff, 2 designers, and an engineer, and I could run every single company, right? And so I tend to be and so these two worlds are colliding on Carspiracy. I'm talking about basically the what often is believed to be a conspiracy by enthusiasts, and a lot of it has to do with I go on, car forums, VW Vortex, but not really. But I go onto these car websites, Autoblog, Car Scoops, and so on, in the drive, and I'm reading comments, and sometimes I go, yeah, these car guys, these enthusiasts, make very good points about why certain things are cool, or why auto manufacturers should do something like, bring back Plymouth. But they don't understand the complexities of the business side of it. I do. Actually, part of the reason this car podcast exists is because I wanted to be in the car industry in one way or another, and I don't wrench. I can't fix anything. I'm not a mechanic. To quote Sean Puff Daddy Combs, I don't write lyrics, but I write checks. So, I don't write rhymes, but I do write checks. Something along the line. Basically, I have one mechanic who I've probably put his son through college 3 or 4 different times at this point. But I can't wrench. As an entrepreneur and kind of salesy scumbag guy, I got into the dealership side of the business. I started selling cars when I was 20 or 22. Didn't really care for it. It was also in the middle of an economic crisis, and people weren't buying as many cars. That's neither here nor there. And it was actually in the frenzy after Cash for Clunkers, which the guy had told me, he's like, dude, if you had just come here 2 months ago, you would have made like $40,000 in 1 month, which would have been rad. Nonetheless, and I wanted a way to be a part of the car industry and the wider industry, and I love to talk. I love cars, so that's why I'm doing a car podcast. And like I said, I could literally run every single automotive company that exists on the face of this planet out of a strip mall in Waco, Texas, but probably Temple. It's a little closer to Austin. But I started this podcast, like I said, to kind of provide that commentary on not just automotive news and business news about cars, but the culture. And I wanted to be critical of things. And part of that is I wanted to talk about why the dealership lobby and the franchise model is broken, or rigged rather, and how that has a long-term negative effect on anyone who wants to own an awesome car, and the RPM Act and all that other stuff. But it really has to do with this. This is a hub, and what spokes out of this hub is products and services in the automotive industry. And I'll be launching my merch business. I actually had it. Didn't work out the way I wanted it to. It didn't look right, so I'm redoing some stuff. I have a couple of marketplaces for different niches that I'm going to be bringing out. And basically, I'm using this as a vehicle to get paid. You see what I did there, vehicle. But at the outset of this thing, the most important thing to me is to have fun and talk about cars. And to round this out, to close this out, I just want to say one thing. Got no airbags, going to die like a real man.